for Liberty Love Fest 4, an evening of live music, arts, education, and trade. Potluck social with liberty-minded people from New England and beyond. April 5th at St. Joseph's Church Hall in Cumberland, Rhode Island. Details on the web at libertylovefest.org. That's libertylovefest.org.
My name is Tony Jones, and you are tuned in to the Coalition, where we discuss all sides of local, regional, and national news, politics, and current events. Online at coalitionradio.us, on Facebook, facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, and check in with me on Twitter via coalition_radio. We are nice and cozy in our tiny water closet studio this evening. It's a packed house. P.O. Taxpayer, good evening.
Hey now. Can I pause a moment for a moment of silence? Born of the loins of the Liberty Movement, brought to fire by the Great Depression of 2008. Let us observe a moment of silence for the Tea Party. DOA, March 2014. Oh, well, that's enough.
I was going to say, it was really hard for me to be quiet about that for that long.
Yeah.
Well,
you did say moment.
With the decision of Mike Chippendale and the legendary, now historic and hysterical Doreen Costa joining the Democratic caucus here in Rhode Island, with Joe Trillo being the first Democrat in nearly 14 years to be elected from his district, sayonara, baby. That was pretty much it.
I would make the argument that with Doreen Costa taking the vice chair on the judiciary, that puts the Tea Party of Rhode Island in a pretty sweet spot.
When you've been co-opted by the Democratic Party?
Well, let's not forget they were co-opted by the Koch brothers before they were co-opted by the Rhode Island Democrats.
What say you, Russ Moore?
I would tend to agree with P.O. Taxpayer here on this one. I thought it was a pretty brilliant move on the part of now Speaker Mattiello to put Doreen Costa as vice chair of the Judiciary Committee, because now, as she admitted herself, I thought I was hearing things when I was listening to the other radio station the other day, where she admitted that she's now, quote, an insider. So she's no longer anti-establishment, she's now pro-establishment. So now that's one less dissident that the speaker has to deal with, and she was pretty loud. Well, say what you want about her, she was pretty loud.
Well, let me refocus the discussion for a moment, because we're getting right into it, folk. You know, all week long in the Twitterverse, in the Facebook sphere, we've been going at it hard and long. On one hand, I've got Rhode Island's own rhetorical John Rambo, Russ Moore here, fighting on the good fight on the cause of moderates and semi-conservatives everywhere. You know,
Thank
Russ,
you.
Man about town, expert on the sport of kings, and champion of the political moderates. On the other side of the room, we have one Dave Fisher, community activist, former candidate for the mayor of Wooney, environmentalist, Green Party member. Tonight, really, to me, is in one sense the culmination of many things here on the Coalition, not the least of which, with most of the family here, we can finally engage in the steel cage rhetorical death match that I've always dreamed of.
What a build-up that is, my God.
Yeah, again, that knack for hyperbole is just...
Wait a minute.
It's smacking.
And the only ode tonight we'll give to our friend Bob Plain, it's a highbrow act of hyperbole here. Okay?
I see. Not pandering.
You know, on one hand, we have Doreen Costa, who in her own narcissistic, self-absorbed way has decided that she's made history by being the assistant deputy to the director of the Commerce Committee, the person in charge of something. To which Brian Newberry, and possibly one of the most snarky things I've ever heard come out of the Republican Party, mentioned that some members of the caucus seem to be more interested in personal political gain. So, Mr. Fisher, what say you about the rise to power of the goddess Doreen Costa?
Well, from a progressive standpoint, there's nobody worse that could be in any kind of position on the Judiciary Committee. I mean, anti-abortion, pro-gun, basically said she was siding with Mattiello because she couldn't vote for anybody that considered themselves a progressive. Now, I look at this and I say, having a political view is one thing, but I'm of the view that you can't just vote that way. You just can't vote based on ideology that way, especially in a state that's where the state house is so populated by moderate Democrats and not so populated by somewhat moderate Republicans.
Mr. Moore.
That's an interesting point you make, and I tend to agree with it. And I'd have to add, I'm a little bit surprised, given a lot of your comments that you made on Twitter and Facebook over the last week, because I think you all agree that you were very in support of Mike Marcello.
I still am.
And look, Mike Marcello is not a big-time progressive. However, I would argue that he was put up to run for Speaker because he looked more marketable to the larger House of Representatives because he is rather moderate. However, the people that were backing him were pretty progressive. You had Chris Blazajewski, you had Edith Agello, Helio Mello, you had Anastasia Williams, but all of these people held leadership positions. So I think what I was trying to argue over the past week on the blogosphere and face-to-face with people was that a vote for Mattiello, despite the fact that he was majority leader, was actually more of a vote for change than was a vote for Marcello because of the people he was backed by who already held leadership positions.
Yeah, but if you look at what legislation moves in the state house, I think that the progressives in that sense were rather underrepresented and have been for quite some time. I mean, it took a 15-year fight to get same-sex marriage passed. But it took that long. It was in the House every single year.
The wheels of government do tend to grind slow, no matter where you are.
Very slowly.
But let me jump in here. In one sense, in a very real sense, on issues that we cover routinely here on the Coalition, the progressive movement seemed to be on the cusp, on the verge of total victory. They just recently gotten marriage equality passed. There were serious discussions about gun control, literally starting to move, glacially but move through the legislature to be given serious consideration. It looked like marijuana was about to be legalized.
And further, I would add that my good friend, Representative Scott Slater, who I'm sure you agree with on many issues, he got the ban the box bill passed, so no longer do people have to say whether they've ever been convicted of a crime.
Yeah, at least on a job application.
This one made me, I wasn't too happy with this one. You may have been. The daycare workers can now unionize. That was a huge victory for progressives. So, there have been victories, as P.O. is pointing out, over the last several years, especially the last 2 years.
So how did the progressive movement snatch defeat from the hands of victory? I mean, was it the failure to embrace a truly progressive candidate in this leadership position?
I think that's part of it. I think the other part of it was there was some, no progressive frontrunner kind of jumped out at the beginning, and people were talking about Blazajewski or Ucci or Marcello. So I think that played into the hands of the moderate side of the Democratic Party. There was a really interesting article on Rhode Island Future this week, and I can't remember if it was Sam Bell or it was Sam Howard, who said, hey, maybe this will be a chance to actually have some kind of dissent in our House of Representatives, because now you've seen these two factions kind of splinter off. And I have no doubt that at one point over that fateful weekend, Marcello did have 33, 34, 35 votes.
I don't think he got that close.
But I think that over time, those people said, look, I got to play a little CYA and go with this guy. I give a lot of credit to the folks that abstained and that stuck behind Marcello through the whole thing.
They now work here.
Yeah, they all have very either no or much smaller offices at the State House
next
now.
to the boiler room.
But that, I think, is indicative, too. So, we heard Mattiello say over the course of that weekend, we're trying to do this as cleanly as possible. We're not making any deals. Well, if you're not making any deals, how the heck did Doreen Costa wind up as the vice chair of Judiciary? Why were Mattiello and DeSimone in the Woonsocket City Hall in Harris Hall talking to former Representative Lisa Baldelli Hunt? And then what I would assume is our Woonsocket delegation. What I found out later was Mattiello and DeSimone were out of Woonsocket before Casey and Moran even showed up to City Hall. So what kind of deal was made there? So, the old saying is what? Don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining.
Interesting points, no doubt, and especially the first point that you made where you said that the progressives couldn't even settle on who they wanted to become speaker. I find it a great irony because one of the things the progressives will always brag about is how well organized they are. That's supposed to be their strength. Yet at the time when they needed that strength the most, it was their biggest weakness. So I think that's an interesting point. But I would also argue what really cost the progressives here was this notion that they have to get everything and they have to get it right away. They went for too much too soon. If they would have, I know you call it making deals and you're making it seem like it's a bad thing, but if they had been a little more, I call it a little more pragmatic, I think they would have been able to advance their agenda much more effectively than by just saying, look, we got to have everything our way or it's the highway.
The one winner in all of this is Federal Hill. The amount of pasta dinners that were sold while everybody was bartering and everybody was getting along to go along.
All the takeout from Angelo's Savita Farnese.
Exactly. Sure.
Well, to me,
by the way, if any of those restaurants would like to buy ad time here on the Coalition, you can contact the PO taxpayer.
Well, what to me is astonishing is that not a single progressive is left standing, are they? True progressive.
Scott Slater is in a very strong position, I would argue.
I think he is, too. I think...
elaborate on that, please.
Well, Blazejewski is out of leadership now, so there's really no solid progressive in the top-tier leadership in the House. We've seen Agello off of Judiciary. We've seen, of course, Mike Marcello is sure to not be the House Oversight Committee anymore, and I know Russ, has a particular bone to pick with the Oversight Committee as a rather toothless committee.
I have a bone to pick with him, not with the way he handled it. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of disingenuous to say, when I'm Speaker, we're going to investigate 38 studios. Wait a minute, Representative Marcello. You have been chairman of the Oversight Committee for the past 2 years, and you have done nothing on 38 studios. Now you want guys like Dave Fisher to rally behind you like you're going to do something about it when you've shown no evidence that you have any propensity to do that.
So I think that this is a big misconception about how the committees work at the State House. Committee chairs, they wield some amount of power, but the majority of that power is in the Speaker's hands, and he pretty much says what comes out of committee and what doesn't. It's how it works in our State House, and from the many off-the-record conversations I've had, not only with progressive Democrats, with moderate Democrats who are fighting to get their bills on, with even members of the the uber minority Republican Party in our House, are very, very frustrated with trying to build that momentum. And a lot of times, even when they do build the momentum, it gets shut down. It never comes to the floor. Or it comes to the floor, and then the Speaker immediately says, we're going to return this to committee.
By the way, let me just interject for a moment. When you talk about uber small Republican minority, as far as the PO taxpayer is concerned, Patricia Morgan is now the party of one. She is the only individual who stood her ground. And I know that's a sensitive term in the liberal world these days, but she stood her ground and committed what some may agree as an act of political suicide. I firmly believe, and I don't know her well, I've never met her, but I firmly believe was an act of conscience.
I have to agree. First of all, because when the Speaker Pro Tem moved from nominations to the voting process, completely skipping over any kind of discussion, I think somebody in that room should have had the point to say, Madam, point of order. We need to have discussion on this, and that didn't happen.
Why didn't she do it, though?
Well,
she's been around for years.
She actually tried to.
She has.
She tried. Excuse me. She tried to do it. She tried to when she cast her vote.
Yeah, but that wasn't the right time.
Right, but I think we all know from the Dirty Dan Connor days, all right, when he moved away from E-Verify using a parliamentary move. It's a good way to seemingly get escorted out of the room. Ask our friend Dan Badandi. Did both of you, first Dave, did the collective might of the progressive, green, liberal democratic movement, near obsession with social issues, ultimately proved to be part of its undoing? That their ignorance, if you will, of the king of all Democrats, Bill Clinton's messianic message, it's the economy, stupid, them completely ignoring that, did that help in their demise?
Well, first of all, I don't think that they ignore it. I think the problem is typically in political discussions, things are things are framed as siloed items.